video. So the way I've set this up today is just because of the nature of the topics and some of the demos I'm doing here, looking at some very deep areas in terms of technology. I had to do this as a video. I do have the ability to stop and pause it. So what I'll do is, if you have questions, raise your hand as normal. We'll pause it. I will have a big chunk of time at the end for other questions. And if you had a chance to see the outline, I have this set up. Let me grab mine. I have this set up in 3 areas. So we'll first talk about introduction, which is kind of a setup, learning about, for example, Julie, we were talking on Facebook, I think it was the other night, about having the 2 versions of Zoom. You have like a web-based version, and then you also have the app. And so just important to go through that. So section 1 will be all the introduction topics. Section 2, we'll look at some classic features. A few things have changed in terms of classic features. So at any time, if you get bored or whatever, you want to grab your Better Together. I don't know if you have your mug. Look at this. I've got my mug today, and I just want some props here, some points. I have my Better Together glass. So I have both of them. Very cool. The mug, by the way, I have to do a shout out. This is so thermally sound. It keeps my coffee warm for hours, so I love it, and I use it all the time. Every day it's my new go-to coffee mug. So let me let a few more people in here. So at any time, if you need to grab a cup of coffee or step off, totally understand that. And then section 3 will focus on the new Zoom features, and some of these are pretty significant, including multi-spotlight, multi-pinning, if you're doing anything with interpretation with students, if you want to do a group presentation. That's a great feature. And another one for those of you doing speech classes, music classes, certainly anything with audio, you can now do high quality audio, and it's actually pretty amazing. Let me just check the chat room in case I get questions. I'll try to do all that today. Laura said, yes, the mugs are awesome. I totally agree. So thank you to the college for providing the mugs. So let's start off here. And again, I'm going to talk on top of this. We'll see how this goes. But some of you had a chance to attend the LTCC, letting some more folks in here, LTCC holiday party. And I personally thought it was really cool. We had so many people there, and it was just, more interactive than you would think maybe a virtual party could be. And I think that's one of the realizations about Zoom, is that it does provide a lot of options for us, of course, during the pandemic. And so it's definitely something that we're using more frequently, I think, than we ever have in the past, of course. Just as I say on here, if we save our questions for the end, I'll try to go through the timings here as they come up. If something does come up, though, you could certainly ask a question. So first off, the most important thing I think to begin the workshop is to check and update the version of Zoom that you have. I will flash the current version up here in a second. It's 5.4.7. So one of the things I can do is go and click on, I want to make sure, of course, that I have a licensed version of Zoom. And that's always available. If you see the rainbow colored license, that means that you have the correct type of account that you need. You can always click on your account profile. It will also give you some information about your account, including your account number, the owner of it, and so forth. And everything that we do is through CCC Confer. Now, this right here I'm clicking on is my app version. This is what resides on my computer in addition to my logon to the web version of Zoom. And it's a little confusing. I'll go through later the different features for each and how you might use each of these. So again, if you click on the right top side of on your avatar, you will see that it's licensed. And you can also click on updates. This is actually the old version. The current is 5.4.7. Once you find that, you just click install. This is all being done on a Mac, so yours might look a little bit different. It might ask you to include your password. Again, on a PC, I think it probably looks a little bit different. The reason this is important is if you don't have the most current version, all these features I'm talking about, including the ability to put on, bunny ears and all kind of weird avatars and stuff, you will not be able to do any of that. If you click on check for updates and it says you're up to date, you're good to go. So that's pretty important. Now, You can always go to the Zoom website and see the current releases, and it will tell you all the greatest features that are included. And that way you can kind of see, well, if I'm not able to do virtual background, or if I'm not able to do high quality audio, what's going on there. It might be that I don't have the most current version. So again, the most current now is 5.4.7. So if you don't have that, you won't have the latest and greatest features. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the importance of having the Pro version of Zoom. And the reason for this is if you don't have the Pro version of Zoom, you will not be able to have meetings longer than 45 minutes. I'm just trying to make sure I let everybody in here. And other things. So it's just very important to have the Pro version. I'm just waiting for the video to advance here, get caught up with it. So in terms of that Pro version, I'm going to show you here just how to make sure that you know you have the Pro version. By having the Pro version, again, you not only get that unlimited meeting time, you can host up to 100 participants. So that's the one you want. Do not pay for a Zoom account. I know some people talked about paying for it. There's no reason to do that. There is potentially, I don't want to say a glitch, but a bit of a waiting period just to get access to the Pro version of Zoom. So I also want to throw this out just as a recommendation. You can go to the LTCC Teaching and Learning website, click at the top on one-pagers, and this has a lot of information in many different areas of teaching and learning and technology. And in particular, scroll down and click on the Zoom version, which I'm going to scroll back up here. I'm trying to remember what I did in terms of my scrolling. There we go. We're going back up. And you'll want to click on the Zoom one-pager. And once you do that, just waiting for myself to stop scrolling. And here we go. You'll click on this. And this has a lot of information. I need to update this with some of the new workshops. But anytime you need anything, you can click on that PDF. Click on the Sign Up right on the PDF. And you will first, once you download it, it'll look like this. And then click on the sign up. This is the sign up sheet. And again, most of you have done this. If your account right now says Pro version, you don't have to do this. Make sure you put in your LTCC email. We've found there's a bit of a glitch that could happen. So if you're a part-time faculty member, you may need to include @mail in front of your .ltcc.edu. This typically will only take, some people have told me, 3 to 4 hours, maybe could take an entire day. If that doesn't happen, the recommendation is to go in and do the form again another time. If that still doesn't happen, go back to either send an email right here to support@ccctechconfer.org, or there's another place on that same sign-up sheet that allows you to request help. And so that's just important to know. Again, when I go to either of my accounts under the web version or the app version, if it says license and here's the app version, then I know I'm good to go. So if you see that rainbow, generally you know you're fine. You have the Pro version of Zoom, and that's the most important thing there. Now, I just put this on here not to be snarky or anything, but I'm just making this clear. So the question is Scott the Zoom administrator? Anyone know the answer? Oh, it already came up. The answer is no. Okay. And I'm only saying this not because I love helping all of you with Zoom, but I can't dive in and determine anything about the success of your application for the Pro account through CCC Tech Confer. So just keep that in mind. And that's the only reason I can't answer whether or not your application was successful for that Pro account. Again, wait at least 24 hours. If you don't see anything, get in touch with the tech support folks. Now, you will notice that there are, again, 2 versions of Zoom that you have to keep track of. It's a little confusing. There's the desktop app version. That's the program that resides natively on your computer as an actual app, just like Microsoft Word. You might use that for features that we'll talk about, including a video. Actually, I'll pause this once we get to the end of it, because I'm going to let someone else in as well. So let me let these all pop up on the screen, and I'll talk about them. But the web version, which is on the right, you will use for setting up your meetings. So you go to your meetings tab, you schedule new meetings, you can have recurring meetings and so forth. Anytime you do recordings and you want to access those recordings, including your audio files, your video file, your transcript, of saved chat, any reports. You would also click on either recordings or reports, depending on what you're looking for. Any of your settings that are really those deep dive settings that get into all the dynamics of what happens when someone new enters your Zoom meeting. Do you want to put them automatically in a waiting room? Do you want to allow them to have the ability to screen share? All that kind of stuff resides, and we'll look at this later, in your settings tab. Again, this is the web app. It's clearly here a web page. You can see that. So global settings, schedulings, recording, and reports. Now, the native version of Zoom, again, which is the same thing as all those programs that sit on your computer like Microsoft Word and PowerPoint and everything else, then is also used for a number of key features. I tried to, distinguish between the two. Contacts is where you would use the web or not the non-web version of the app, the computer version of the app. That allows you, just like on your phone, to set up contact chains and lists of contacts, and to start meetings immediately with your contact list. Any updating of the app is always done also through, any updating of Zoom is done through the actual native app that lives on the computer. Again, the difference is you can see this looks like a little app, whereas this is an actual web page. And then anything like technology settings, when we want to do fancy stuff, if we want to go in and choose virtual backgrounds and adjust our camera settings, some of that can be done on the fly as a host or even as a participant in your Zoom panel. So that's kind of a third area where you adjust some of these settings. So it's a little confusing. I know sometimes someone was saying the other day that they couldn't access something, and it might have been because they hadn't downloaded the new version of the app on their computer. So it's a little confusing, but just important to remember that, because it's pretty unique, I think, to a lot of our programs to have actual two versions that we're working with really at the same time, the web version and also the desktop version. We'll go on to settings in Zoom. I'm not going to go through all these, and these are very extensive. If you had a chance to work with Zoom over the last year or so almost that we've been under lockdown, you'll know that two things really. There's a lot that you can dive into and change, and that these change over time because of the fact that Zoom is constantly updating. As an example, in the last year, the security updates that we've had with Zoom are hugely beneficial to us in terms of blocking Zoom bombing and so forth. My big tip for you on settings is when you go into your settings, again on the web version, go up into the search bar, right-hand corner, and type the word that you want to find that you want to change the setting for. So if I want to look at my chat settings, I would type chat. It will tell me how many matches there are, and then I can go in and specifically dive in and be able to change those settings. But there's so much. Just look at all the settings for recording. Just recording settings are incredibly involved. Again, to make it a little bit confusing, I go to my app version of Zoom, I click on Preferences, and the same thing, I'm going to find a lot of settings. But notice these are technology settings. So these relate to my camera. They relate to screen share, to the chat room, what the chat room looks like, how I want my messages to appear, what type of recordings. Again, I'm just clicking on some of these to show you samples. So you have to play with this, and I think over time you'll remember, in terms of the nuances of Zoom and the settings, you'll remember where these are. But to be honest with you, they change so frequently that I'm constantly digging for stuff myself, and I use Zoom as you all do, probably on a daily basis. But because things are changing so quickly, it really often requires you to go in and do a text search. And again, the easy way to do that on your computer is to hit Command or Option F, and then that is find, and then you can go in with that hotkey and typically type in the word you're looking for, and you'll be able to find hopefully that information here. So that's a little bit about Zoom settings. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is Wi-Fi strength and computer power. And this could actually have some impact on us. I know some of us have been in meetings. I've had trainings I've done where they've crashed. My computer has crashed in the middle of a training. It's always embarrassing. At any time, if I click on statistics, or I think is under statistics or settings. It's under statistics. You can look at your overall settings, video, audio, screen sharing. It'll tell you the capacity in real time of how your computer is doing. And so again, if you start to get a lot of blue bars in this area, it means in any of these areas that you might be strained. And so this is a handy thing to do. I'll talk about later using Zoom just by yourself to practice. It's kind of weird, right? Talking to yourself, but it's a great way to get ready for a class or a meeting. And as a result, one of the things you can do is check the power of your Wi-Fi. You can also check the power of your computer and how it's handling. It'll tell me my CPU capacity. It'll tell me my memory. And it will show me, again, using these bars in real time, how my computer is doing in terms of running Zoom. That's independent from bandwidth, which is your Wi-Fi settings, which we'll talk about next. But I know some of you, if you're sharing a lot of your Wi-Fi with other folks in your household, your kids are playing potentially video games or whatever, that is maybe draining your computer or your bandwidth. So this is showing in real time. I can click on audio. It tells me the frequency response of my audio. Again, I'm just doing this a recording I did, just practicing on my own. If I go to the top and I turn off original sound, you'll see the frequency changes from 48 kilohertz to 24. 24 is pretty darn good. I don't know how many of you are going to be playing cymbals on your drum kit during your Zoom session, but you're probably going to be okay with that. It also tells you your frames per second, 14 frames per second, and then it has some information about screen sharing. At the time, I wasn't doing a screen share, so I really do recommend looking at that. Now, secondly, check your Wi-Fi speed. Just go to Google, type in Wi-Fi speed test. The first or second one that comes up, you can click on. And then all you'll do on that is typically hit go. It will run some pings. It'll tell you your upload and your download speeds. And then based on that, you have maybe a pretty good sense of, and I'll show you in a second what Zoom recommends for your Wi-Fi settings. But based on that, you'll probably have a pretty good sense checking those two things, the settings tab on your native app in Zoom to see how your video is doing. Was someone saying something or? Okay, so I guess it went away. That's fine now. So this will tell you again your Wi-Fi speed. So based on that, you can make some decisions about whether to upgrade your router, whether to upgrade your Wi-Fi, and so forth. This, if you go to Zoom, the web page to support. I think I got it finally. Someone was unmuted. So okay. Got it. Okay, sorry. Now, one thing I want to mention about this is if you use some of the advanced features in Zoom, particularly if you use stereo audio, high quality audio, that really can drain both your processor and your bandwidth. I haven't found too many issues with video. A lot of our video cards or video cameras aren't going to be running again at 30 frames per second or 24 frames per second, so they're probably not going to drain our computer or Wi-Fi as much as maybe audio would. So just keep in mind, if you start to go in and toggle some of these settings, as Zoom warns you, it could actually impact both your capacity to run a meeting or participate in a meeting. So I wouldn't recommend you do stereo audio or high quality audio unless you're teaching speech, you're teaching a music class, an audio production class like Solange might be doing, because you just probably don't need stereo audio to talk over Zoom. I just don't think that's necessary. But I'll give you a sample later of how this can make a difference if you are doing like music or speech. Now again, to practice in Zoom, all you have to do is at any time go to this is me on the screen here, you just have to go to your app, either the web version or the desktop version, and click Start Meeting. You can practice some things, you can mess around with breakout rooms, you can mess around with your video filters and so forth. This is a handy thing to do before you start a class or a meeting, particularly if it's a big deal, just to make sure you know exactly what you're doing. You can try out the whiteboard. You can try out experiments with doing a screen share using your iPhone or your iPad. And all those are very cool, but all those require, again, some knowledge ahead of time. If I want to do some screen sharing and show someone my program here and show them some files or whatever, I might want to practice this just ahead of time because if I'm doing on the fly, typically I'm not going to be able to maybe handle some of those nuances. And again, what I try to do is just practice ahead of time and make sure everything is working the way that I want it to work. So just waiting for the video to catch up here. Now the next thing is we'll talk about Zoom versus ConferNow, which is another area I would say is a little bit confusing. Let me just see if I could zip ahead here. You'll hear about Zoom or using ConferZoom, or sometimes called ConferNow. The name has changed over time. So both of these programs are, I guess the way of saying it is that ConferNow is what holds our Zoom and allows us to schedule our meetings, but Zoom is the actual technology or app that we use. So what you could do is you can go in right now to Zoom using your web version and click Schedule a Meeting. You could type in the name of the meeting, you could do the date, the time, the duration, all the dynamics of the waiting room and all that information. Or you could do this through Confer. Confer is only found within a Canvas shell, and most of you have experienced this, and we'll see in a second how that works. I can click on any of my classes. Once I do that, I want to make sure that ConferNow is showing up there in my menu. If it's not showing up in my menu, I go to my settings and I click on my navigation, and anything that's at the top in Canvas is active. Anything that is at the bottom is inactive. I always had to hit save at the bottom. This is an area in Canvas that doesn't auto-populate unless you hit save. Once I've done that, once I've dragged ConferNow to the top and hit save, it will now populate in the left menu there. And all I have to do is click on ConferNow. Once I click on that, I can click the home button again just to get to my home page. And then I'll click on ConferNow. And then this is the tool that allows me to both schedule meetings using the appointment booking, or I could schedule office hours. I can also choose to view my recordings. My students can as well. What I'll say to you, and I'm not doing the deep dive here on how to use Confer, is I feel like it's a matter of preference. People go back and forth, which is better and so forth. I think the GUI, the graphic interface in Zoom itself, is a little more attractive, and I find it easier to use versus Confer. The advantage of Confer is if you have students in a class, they can immediately click on and view a recording, click on the Zoom link to start a meeting, whereas in a module page, it might take a step or two more. To do it with a module page, what you would do is you would first find the meeting that you want to share with your students. And I'll click on that, and I think I typically have blurred some of this out. Maybe I'll have to blur that in post-production, but so I would just click on the meeting that I want to share. And then I can copy the whole invitation. That's the phone information, all that stuff. I really don't need all that. I probably just want that little URL or web address right there. I can cut and paste that using my keystroke on the keyboard. And then I'll go back to my Canvas page. Again, this is the non-Confer way of setting this up for your class. And then what I'll do is, I'll show that in a second on the video, is I would actually paste that into a module page. Now, one question you might have is if you're setting up a Zoom meeting, should you have a recurrence? Just like on Outlook, you could set up a recurrence that allows you, if you click that right there, recurring meeting, to customize by day, by week, by month, by number of repeats. You can choose an end date either by a date or a number of occurrence, x equals 7, x equals 10, and so forth. So some people might want to do that if their class is meeting every Thursday from 2 to 3 for a Zoom. Set up your recurrence for the whole quarter. That way you have one link to give to your students. Other people, though, like to do it a different way, and this is where I'm showing you how to share that link. Other people like to have a very specific link. For week 1, it's a Zoom, week 1 Zoom. Week 2 is week 2 Zoom for your class or your meeting, whatever it happens to be. So if that's the case, you could set up 10 different meetings versus one meeting with the same address using that recurrence feature. So again, this is not using Confer, this is using Zoom, and all I would do is create a module page and say, please click on this link to join our first class meeting. I would save that. The students go to the module page, they click that, it immediately takes them to that Zoom meeting. Now keep in mind again, because our Zoom is housed through the community colleges through Tech Confer, you always see that prefix on your web address, on your URL. So that's just normal, but again, it's an indication of how we're hosted through CCC Tech Confer. So again, kind of options there for you to choose from. Before we jump into the next section, are there any questions that come up here about anything like settings, anything related to Confer, Wi-Fi strength, how to practice in Zoom, anything that's come up on your end before we jump into classic features that you'd like to ask about.
Hey Scott, I put a question in the chat, but
See it now.
when you were talking about sound, so I'm teaching, I'm teaching this film class
Yeah.
starting this quarter, and I'm going to be showing the films during Zoom. Do you have any recommendations on settings, what I should do, what I shouldn't do? I'll be
Yeah.
running the films in my PC and showing them on Zoom.
Yeah, I think you can do that test, do the Wi-Fi test, and do that settings test on your Zoom app to see how your computer's doing. And I think you mentioned to me that you just got a new computer. So if that's the case, I would then recommend going to Zoom settings, choosing high quality audio. You can decide whether you want to do stereo or not. I mean, if students are using headphones, a lot of music videos I'm listening to, they often will say for the best experience, put on headphones because you want to experience stereo separation. So if that's the case, and a lot of your students are using headsets, headphones, Bluetooth earbuds or whatever, you might want to do that. The question or the issue that might happen is your students, then you might want to give them a heads up and say, by the way, you can also on your end click high quality audio, because I'm thinking, there's both ends of this. There's my computer, and then there's also your computer picking up the audio. Later, I'll show you a sample using a thumb piano, a kalimba, where you can hear the dramatic difference in audio performance using the higher quality audio. Maybe just warn your students, though, if anyone's viewing it on a phone, they might run into some lag issues, or they might even get kicked off the session if they can't keep up with that. So I would say if you could, sure, go for high quality audio with something like a film, since you're showing that live. Yeah. And you have to, keep me posted. Tell me how that goes, because I'm always curious, and I don't hear or I don't know unless I hear from you. So that's a great question, great idea. Anyone else?
There may be a hardware contribution from your computer, which may affect the
Exactly. Yeah, that's the tricky thing. That's what's unique. Sometimes if you often have co-hosts assigned to Zoom meetings, because if one person's computer is lagging, as Kurt is saying, or their Wi-Fi isn't performing, the co-host can take over, and then it's a better quality meeting. So that's the other issue too. Playing a video on a computer shouldn't be an issue. So, but yeah, Kurt's right. It could happen on both ends for sure. So something to think about. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Anyone else that has? I'm trying to watch here. Michelle is saying, Scott, I don't see the same settings as you in Zoom. Does that mean I need to update? Yeah. So you definitely should update. Oh, you found the settings. Okay. This is happening in real time. Yeah. So definitely update on your desktop client version of Zoom. Again, I don't know the PC version if it looks like my version on the Mac. But once you find that, it'll tell you if there's a new update or if you have the most current version. Michelle said she found the settings. Kelsey, Julie, you also want to make sure your screen sharing settings allow for sharing computer sound when showing videos. Yes, absolutely. And I think we'll see that on a slide coming up, but that's also true. Good point, Kelsey. So make sure when you start that share, right at the bottom left, you click Share Computer Audio, and that way the students will be able to hear the movie that you're playing. So really, really good point there too. Really great tips. Okay, so let's jump into classic features again. This will be old news for many of you. I'll try to include as many of the new features or updates as they've changed. And then again in section 3, we'll get into all the new features, which I think are really cool. So the first feature here is just mentioning the difference between what a participant sees in Zoom and a host. So right now you're seeing different things than I see, because as a host, I have the ability, right, to control certain things. We're seeing a little bit here the video filters feature, which I was trying out during the big computer or the big extravaganza, the holiday extravaganza. So again, when you are working as a participant versus a host, you see different things. You can always have the option to choose how you see things in terms of whether you want to see a side-by-side view, a gallery view, and so forth. So there's a lot of customization that is possible in terms of your Zoom settings. And again, we're just seeing here some of what I can change on the fly. It is handy to have your app version of Zoom available during a meeting if you want to change things like the video filters and so forth. Again, at the bottom of the screen as a participant, I was a participant, not a host at the party. I could do reactions, share screen if that's enabled by the host. I could participate in chat, and I can click on the participants. One of the cool new features that you maybe aren't aware of that I think is really amazing is I can actually go in and rearrange video tiles such that I can put people where I want people to be. This could be great if you want to learn students' names in a class and so forth. So we'll look at that later, but that's a really good feature. Again, you can click on anyone's profile picture in a meeting. More power typically as a host to change things. You have access as a participant to chat as you do as a host, but typically there's more features that you have access to if you're a host versus being a participant. Just see here, I'm just showing you some of the new reactions, like the open mouth reaction, the party exploding confetti reaction. That is new with some of the recent updates. So again, you want to just make sure that you have the most current version to be able to use some of those new reactions. Just going to jump ahead here a little bit. One disadvantage of doing a video like this is you can't control the slides like you do in PowerPoint. So I think my next one here is, let me just get right to the start of that slide. This is our audio section. So just to point out that when you're working in Zoom, if you click on your audio, it looks like a microphone. You can mute yourself. Click on that arrow next to the microphone, and you have all these settings that you could choose. You could select your microphone. So if I have more than one microphone, which I don't have it here, but I can plug in my USB microphone. Once I do that, just like with video, if I plug in a second webcam, immediately that will appear, and then I can go in and choose, instead of the internal mic off my computer, I can choose an external mic. You could even do that if you have a mixing board set up. As long as you have your USB set up, you should have the option to select that. Now, as we talked earlier, that could put some drain on your computer, particularly if I'm running in with this mixer. I could run in 16 channels of audio into my computer, but that could have an impact on the stability of my Zoom session. So I may not want to go overboard. Loopback audio is a way of looping your audio for OBS, for open broadcasting software, live broadcasts on Facebook and YouTube. So you don't probably have that option unless you've installed it. Speaker options, again, typically I would probably just choose my internal speakers, or if I have a headset, choose the headset setting, whatever that happens to be. I'll just resume this here. Again, that's where you would click on it. On your app, you also have the ability to see, just with a VU meter, the level of your audio to see if your microphone is strong enough. Again, a nice way to practice this, to make sure prior to your class or big important board meeting or whatever that everything is working, is start a solo Zoom meeting by yourself, and then do a recording of that. And then after you're done with that, load that up on your computer, listen to the video recording. If your audio is choppy, if it's distorted, if your voice is falling in and out, you know it's time to go in, adjust your settings, get a new microphone, maybe do something with your microphone settings. And that's the same thing, of course, with your video settings. Again, what I'm just showing you here is if I plug in that microphone, that Bluetooth microphone or that USB microphone, it'll show up. I can then choose that for my settings. Zoom is typically really good about this. The minute you plug in a new USB device, you have that as an option. So now we go on to video, and very similar to audio in terms of controlling your settings. You'll see that here, and we'll talk about everything from the virtual backgrounds to studio effects, and I'll even show you the option for a green screen. And you'll see in a second why I did this video shooting ahead of time, because it takes some time to set that up. So I could click on my camera icon. Again, I can choose filters there. I can choose a virtual background. I can turn my video on and off in terms of my camera. I can switch from, if I have a USB camera connected, I could switch that. Here's my virtual background. If I wanted to choose that, I could click on that. Let's see if I do that. That's where they're located. The studio effects, this is where I look really silly, right? I can give myself new eyebrows, or I can give myself really cool lip color. I don't know why I want to do this. When any of you figure out why we would want to do that to our pictures, let me know. So now this here, I'm going to show you one of the issues that happens. You see how I look pretty silly doing this, but you see how I can see the backdrop showing in. And the reason for this is Zoom is really slick, but it's taking a lot of processing on Zoom's end to try to figure out exactly what is a part of me and what is a part of my background. It's a lot easier if you use a chroma system, a green screen system to do this. Again, you can see around my ears, anytime there's movement going on, I look so stupid doing this, don't I? You see that. So the option is you can set up a green screen. Excuse this. I was doing this in like 5 minutes. I have a ton of creases. If you do this, put your green screen in the dryer for like 10 minutes on air fluff. Totally pro tip there, or I don't know if that's a pro tip, but it will help. So if you do that, you get a lot less of that effect. Although you see, because I have some creases and I don't have my green screen set up perfectly, those creases start to show through as well. But it's not doing as much of that effect showing the background on my hands, because that chroma that is detected on the computer, that green color, allows my computer to take a break, take a sip of coffee a little bit, if you will, and not have to do as much processing as it would if I choose the virtual backdrop setting. So again, I don't know, using a green screen, the one application I was thinking of was maybe a PE class, where you're far back and you don't want to show like you want to have more of like a studio type setting to replicate a gym or a cool yoga studio, or a Peloton type class or something like that. Then you could put the green screen up. Again, throw it in the dryer before you use it, because if you let these sit in your garage or whatever, every single crinkle or wrinkle, whatever you call these, will affect the performance of that chroma replacement that the computer is doing, that Zoom is doing. And again, you don't want anything like this. I literally threw it up very quickly one day just to show you that it's a little better, but it does take a little more work on your end if you want to use a green screen. So probably not the thing that most people will end up doing. Again, if you want to use studio effects and have purple eyelashes or whatever, you can do that. Some of the video filters are cool, I think. That one's not cool. That's pretty campy or kitschy. They need to work on these. Again, if you use these in a class or in a meeting, that one's really cool, right? Any of you like this? No one's laughing. I don't know. My virtual mask. I think I look pretty strange, but all of you just have this like straight face, like, well, that's just Scott. That's just how he rolls. So, yeah. So I don't know. Most of these are not the kind of thing, but it's pretty cool, right? And this is a direct. What's the program? Is it Instagram or Facebook that does this? I don't use Instagram. I think Instagram does, right? Michelle said she loves it. So they're probably copying from Instagram or Facebook a little bit. How professional your class or meeting will be if you use that those features, that's up to you to decide. Again, any of my video settings, I can during a meeting, I can adjust here. I can select my camera. I can choose mirroring options for my video. Touching up appearance, I think, is kind of sinister and creepy. I don't know. I think there's a sense of authenticity, right, for not allowing our blemishes to show or whatever. But you can do that if you want to. And again, if you want to display a certain number of participants in your Zoom session, like if you're teaching a speech class, then maybe you might want to set that to 25 at a time or something. Screen share, we talked about this earlier in terms of sharing audio during your screen share. So most of you, I think, are pretty familiar with screen share, but let's go through it a little bit. So when you get to screen share, you have a lot of different options. Desktop, you can select the whiteboard. You can do, if you're on a Mac, iPhone, or iPad. You can also now select multiple windows. And Julie, this is what Kelsey was referring to. Make sure to hit share sound if you're showing a movie. Julie, did you put on, you have pirate gear on. Look at you. That's so cool. See, I'm not the only one. So, yeah, so click share sound and that will allow you to play that movie on the screen. One cool thing now that you can do differently than before in Zoom is you can share multiple windows at the same time. I'll show you why you might want to do that later. It's mainly for privacy if there's a lot of clutter or stuff on your desktop that you don't want your participants to see. You can do that and it allows you to maybe have a more professional looking Zoom screen share. Let me just jump ahead here a little bit. So this allows you, the bar that you saw there on the screen allows you to control dynamics of the screen share. Again, I can click on whiteboard. I can click on any program that's open at the time, like Microsoft Word or Final Cut Pro. I can then, I could show that again, the entire screen with my desktop screen share, or I could select by program. And the reason for doing that, as I said, is it allows you to only show exactly what's in that program window versus your desktop. And then maybe you had, your sports scores, your sports ESPN stuff up there, and you don't want to show that on the screen or whatever. Yeah, and Kurt's saying if you really want the green screen to work, stretch it on a frame. Absolutely. Yeah, very true. I actually have a frame in the garage. It's pretty cumbersome. And the problem with doing a green screen here is I don't have enough depth here and I don't have flat walls. So it's actually not a good place to do it. But Kurt's totally right. You can make it perfectly good frame from PVC pipe from the hardware store. Absolutely true. You can also buy a frame from Amazon for, I want to say $30 or $40, and it comes with the clips and it allows you to do, as Kurt's saying, a really good green screen. And again, maybe for like a PE class or an art class, it could be really ideal. This allows you to share a portion of your screen in Zoom. So if you only want to show part of it, you'll see the green bars come up, and that shows you exactly what section of the screen you want to share. So as Zoom has advanced here over the last year, a lot more allowances to do more with screen sharing. I'll show you slides as virtual background in just a bit. And again, the whiteboard is, I think, people have said sort of mixed responses to the whiteboard, whether it's good or not. It maybe doesn't work so well using a mouse. If you have a tablet or something like that with a pen, it's a little easier to write on the screen. I find my writing is terrible in general, and it gets even worse when I'm trying to write with a mouse. In the old days before COVID, when you signed for UPS, it's really hard often to, I kid you not, that's the best I can write on the whiteboard. You can, of course, type text if you want as well. They have various stamps. I don't find the stamps to be that useful. They have, hearts and I don't know. I like whoever designed the whiteboard, frankly, they need to maybe update some of the features here, but you can do geometric figures, you can type things, and so forth. So the whiteboard it's up to you whether you use it or not, but I think it's, for me, maybe not as useful as having a actual whiteboard behind you. Thanks to the senior leadership team folks for buying the whiteboards. If you'd like a whiteboard for your class, which is a mini whiteboard that you can sit behind you on an easel or stick it on the wall, please connect with Melanie in the library, and they do have a number of whiteboards available. I know that people in mathematics really wanted to use pure whiteboards, real whiteboards, not the virtual. I'm just demonstrating here. You can save anything in your whiteboard either as a PNG file, high quality graphic, or a PDF. And so if you want to do that, you can save that and later share that diagram that you drew with your class or had in your meeting, share that with your participants after the fact. So I'll just jump ahead here a little bit. Annotate is similar certainly to the whiteboard, but Annotate allows anyone on the screen, at least the host and maybe others, to use this particular palette of tools to at any time write, circle things for emphasis. This could be great if you're someone teaching an audio production class or a film class, and you want to be able to show people features, circle things on the screen, highlight things. That could be very useful for that particular purpose. Let me just see the next one here. I think I already talked about. We'll jump ahead, but I'm just showing you here. This is what you could do during annotation. So it's everything you can do on the whiteboard and a little bit more, but it's not happening on the whiteboard itself. It's happening on the entire screen or whatever is being shared at that time by the host or any of the participants. Again, you can decide whether you want to use that. If you want to set up multiple cameras in your Zoom session, there's a couple ways to do this. One way to do it is to have a second camera set up, like a webcam through USB. If you're interested in this, I have a whole long video on multicam setups and also doing something like Streamlabs, and that's the interface you're seeing here. This is called Streamlabs OBS. You can literally set up on the screen at the same time 5 different cameras. You could set up a microscope and have that all going at once. You can't currently do that in Zoom. In Zoom, you have to switch to your second camera. You can set multiple cameras up, hook them up through USB, but you always have to click that selection, whereas with OBS, Open Broadcasting Software, you can actually have everything showing at once. So it's a bit of a disadvantage, but for most classes, probably not a big issue. So if you click on iPhone or iPad or content from second camera, those are always going to give you that option then to choose an additional camera. So one thing that can be useful, and I can do this with my profile picture now live, or my profile video is, I can switch to my FaceTime camera so you can see me more close up here, right? And then I can go back to my USB camera that is just in front of my computer. And I'm finding that that one gives me better lighting. I'm very washed out if I select my FaceTime camera and I'm not able to find settings on the Mac to actually adjust that. You can do some adjustments in Zoom, but it's not allowing me to adjust my my FaceTime camera. So if that happens to you and you have another USB camera sitting around, you could set that up. And then all you would do is select that again in your video settings, and that allows you to choose the camera that you want to pick. So that's multi-cameras. The next one, participants in chat. I think we're probably pretty familiar with this. If you are running a meeting, your participants tile there allows you to control some things. You can also click on people's video profiles. That allows you to do things like unmute and some other features. And then at any time with security, this is brand new to Zoom, or not brand new, they developed it over the last few months, but you can immediately suspend participants' activity. Very useful features in terms of security. This is from one of our student sessions we had, but again, if you click on someone's profile right there, you have some new abilities, including multi-pin that we'll talk about in our third section. You could mute someone, you could put them in the waiting room if it's a security issue, and you can hide non-participants and so forth. A lot of options there. For those of you attending tomorrow, the student forum from 12 to 2 will certainly take advantage of the breakout rooms, and that's where I was practicing some of this the last time we did our student session at the end of the quarter. You can do some of this on the fly. There's a new setting in Zoom that allows co-hosts and hosts to set up breakout rooms ahead of time, which can be very nice. So you can name your rooms. So for example, for tomorrow, we might want to have a room just for financial aid for students to talk to Naomi. We might want to have a room just for students to talk to Laura Salinas with the equity office. And that way we can kind of customize each of the breakout rooms for the purpose. So again, you can go to your settings. You can do a lot of this ahead of time, deciding not as many options, I guess, on breakout rooms here, but some options certainly to choose from. So this shows you live. I've redacted all the students here, but it just shows you what you see, the different rooms. Again, I can name a room counseling. And then here I've redacted that. I could click on someone and then reassign them to another room. If I put someone in the financial aid room and they need to be in counseling, on the fly I can very quickly do that. So I find that the breakout room features that have developed over the last few months with Zoom are I think getting better and a little more useful. Let me just, while we're seeing this, answer a question. Can you make a tablet interface with the whiteboard so you can write with a stylus? I would recommend you talk to, I heard Kathy Cox and Bruce Armbrust have been using tablets. So I would reach out to them because I currently don't have a tablet. But as far as, I think if you had a USB device that allowed you to write, you could probably assign that using key commands, because there are some key commands. I can't think off the top of my head which key commands are available for the whiteboard. But I believe the answer is yes, that you could do that. Certainly with a secondary program, there are secondary programs for Mac and PC that allow you to do custom keystrokes or key commands for just about anything. Again, with the new update to Breakout Rooms, participants can choose rooms. That is an option. You can allow them, and you can allow the co-host to help manage rooms. So that's really useful. So tomorrow, helping Shauna out with the student forum, I can go in and really just focus on the Breakout Rooms, and she could focus on running the meeting, doing all that other stuff. So that's a good tip also for those of you running big meetings. Maybe assign multiple people to do different things. Some people could handle the breakout rooms. Other people could handle chat. Another person can run the meeting and unmute and mute people. So for recordings, you probably know that anytime a meeting is recording, you're typically going to see that in the top left-hand corner. When you want the recording of your meeting, simply go to your Recordings tab, and all of the recording files will appear. I just went through and deleted. I had 99 files. Talk about a bloated set of recordings. You'll see that everything that you've set up to record, there are a lot of options with recording in terms of separate video files for each participant, separate audio files. So if you do anything in post-production, it's really recommended that you give yourself the highest quality audio and video, and that you also download separate files, because then you can customize the audio and video of each of the participants if you're really interested in doing that. Again, when you click on download, you will get all the files. If you want the shareable link, that will allow anyone to have access to that meeting or that recording, provided you haven't deleted it. The minute you delete it, then of course it's gone. You can also click on, they appear as text files, which will be your saved chat settings, and then your video files. This is on a Mac. Again, on a PC, it might look a little bit different. So all those files are available for you. We'll jump to polling next. And I have to admit, polling is one of those features that I've probably used the least. I just don't do a lot of polling. Some of you might do more polling, and you can certainly speak to this. If you go to your settings tab, you have the option to control a few things related to polling here, as you'll see. The challenge that I find with polling is just trying to add another thing to my already busy Zoom session, right? I'm trying to manage all the chat. I'm trying to unmute people, mute people. I'm trying to do my screen share. I'm trying to load up my PowerPoint. Now I've got to do a poll on top of that. And that's why it's really recommended that if you can have a co-host help you out with some of this. Again, if you're teaching a class, you don't have that option, but that's going to make it a little bit easier. You can do poll questions on the fly. One of the cool things is, and I think it was Lori Thorne in instruction a while back, we were talking about this, Zoom changed the settings with one of the new updates. You can now immediately get the poll results before the meeting has ended. Again, a lot of those annoying things that a lot of users were like, why don't they change this? Well, they finally changed it. So again, poll reports are available during a live session, so that's really good. We're going to jump to closed captioning next, and the big caveat on this is that if you have any specific concerns, please reach out to Kelly in the Disability Resource Center, because they handle everything specific to captioning. The short end of the thing on captioning is that Zoom will not, given what is available in Zoom, Zoom will not allow you closed captions on the fly. So you can click on closed captions and allow someone to type in real time, which, yeah, you got to be a pretty fast typist to get verbatim transcripts. Pretty hard to do. That's why there's stenographers in courtrooms that have, technology to do this. But if I wanted to, I could look into, and I looked into Otter. I wanted to get a basic account to try this out. And then it told me, well, you have to pay for it. But Otter is the one of the number ones out there that I found that really allows you to You don't have to see me signing up for Otter, but it allows you to have real-time captioning. And I believe what they do on this is it's not artificial intelligence, but I think they actually assign a person who does it. And as you could see, it's pretty expensive as a result of that. So again, if you want anything like, and this shows you with Otter, it syncs to all your various apps. So it's pretty cool, but again, it could be very expensive. There is, of course, a requirement, and I think I shared here a little bit. I think it's $20 a month, so it could be a little expensive, but maybe for a program, or if the college was interested in this, maybe a license could be, you only get 600 minutes with a free account. So it's not a lot there if you think about a couple of meetings and you're done with that. That might be one of my videos, right? So that was a joke. Sorry, no one got it. No one got it. This is from the Chancellor's office, and what it's saying here is that there are some stipulations. This is a legal opinion from the Chancellor's office. So if you have any questions about captioning, really do reach out to Kelly. She's the expert on campus, and she's the person you should consult first with any of those questions. Again, the new multi-pin option is really cool because it allows a live interpreter and a student with hearing impairment to see each other exclusively on the screen. So the multi-pin is going to be very good for that. Now, I don't know if you knew this, you can now download the Zoom extension for Outlook. You can immediately then, when you schedule a meeting, click on the Zoom Outlook scheduler right top-hand corner of your message, or your calendar event you're trying to set up, and that allows you to do it right from Outlook if you want to do that. So it saves you maybe one step that you don't have to take by just doing that via Outlook. In terms of security and Zoom bombing, I think Solange was the only person on this call who was there for it, but I had one session I did early on, right when we started doing Zoom, and I didn't have my settings right, and I had all these people that hijacked the meeting. Well, lo and behold, Zoom has now figured out that it's important to have a specific security panel. So at any time in a meeting, you can adjust these. If you don't want chat, if you don't want unmuting or starting video, if anyone's going to, in a public meeting do anything obscene, you can control that. If you want like the ultimate one ring to rule them all here for Zoom security, it is that red thing there. You click on that, and that suspends everything on the call. So if I had that during that Zoom bombing session, I could have immediately stopped all that from happening. What I had to do was end the meeting immediately, and then I had to restart it and so forth. So that's pretty cool that Zoom has really stepped up their game in terms of security. So I've heard very little from people that there have been any security issues. So it sounds like, for the most part, people haven't had issues. Again, protect your unique Zoom URLs that you get. Whenever I do a video in post-production, I blur that out with a censor filter, because if that does get out and it's a recurring meeting, the next time you have that recurring meeting, you might have someone jump on and do a Zoom bomb. I've had a few cases over the last few months where someone tried to join a meeting. I didn't recognize their name. I had them in the waiting room. And again, all those features can be set up ahead of time in your settings, clicking on the waiting room. And what happens then is, if you don't recognize that name, you can send a message to everyone in the waiting room. And if they still don't identify themselves, you can then make the decision to never let them in the meeting. Now, this is kind of cool. You can now do secure endpoint encryption. And I don't think this will apply to most people on this call. However, if you're doing anything with counseling, anything, mental health counseling is an example, and you want to make sure it's HIPAA compliant, medically compliant, this end-to-end encryption could be really, your kind of thing in terms of security. So when you click on a meeting, if you have that set up, it will tell that information here. Now the disadvantage of doing end-to-end encryption would be it strips away a lot of your features. I think it takes away screen sharing by all participants and so forth. So it may not be ideal, but if you had something that you needed HIPAA compliance for, that would be where you'd want to go. That's under your settings. Just look under, type in the word encryption, and that will pop up. The waiting room is pretty self-explanatory. I'll just kind of maybe jump over that one. Social streaming at any time. If you want to stream I don't know if you would do this, but if at any time you want to stream your Zoom session to any of your other social media platforms, click on the right-hand bottom on More, and you can choose YouTube. You can choose Live on Facebook and also Live on Workplace by Facebook. And so, yeah, that could be handy if you want to do that. And lastly, we'll talk about key commands and using a Stream Deck. What key commands are, and this kind of relates to Kurt's question about the whiteboard. So key commands refer to any combination of keys on your keyboard that allows you to do something. And you can at any time click on keyboard shortcuts on the native version of the Zoom app, and it'll show you what currently is assigned, and you can in some cases then reassign that key. If you're fancy and you get a Stream Deck, which is one of these things, what you can do is set up customized graphic keys for any meeting, and it allows you on the fly, you can see on the screen there, in programs, when I'm working on a video in Final Cut, I don't have to, every time I want a compound clip, figure out the key command for that or choose it from my menu in my software. I click the button on my Stream Deck and it immediately does that for me. So it's a total game changer for me in terms of software use. For Zoom, I use it a little bit. I have an unmute. I have a video on and off. So it's kind of handy. But for my big pieces of software that have thousands of commands that I can't possibly remember, then I use that for that purpose. So if you want to learn more about this, you can watch my video on Stream Deck and key commands, and it tells you more about those particular features. So before we jump into the new features, and this will include, this shouldn't be too much longer. I would say there's about 7 or 8 features. Do you have any questions about any of those classic features? I've kept up with the chat room, but maybe some other things I've missed here and some things that you've found to be the case with Zoom that you want to talk about? If so, unmute yourself. Otherwise, I'll take a sip of warm coffee from my nice new LTCC mug. There we go. Applause all around. So perfectly hot. It's almost too hot to drink. I kid you not. So okay, well, no questions. So let's go into the advanced features. And these are the latest and greatest. And I think some of these are really game changers for really both meetings you might be scheduling as well as certainly for classes. Again, we talked about earlier just making sure that your Zoom is up to date. So make sure you've done that by going to your profile. This is just a summary of some of those new features. So some changes in virtual background, calendar integration, waiting room, multi-share, and a few others. The first of these is rearranging video tiles. And this one I think is pretty cool because it allows you to customize the Zoom experience that you get. So as a participant in a meeting, maybe you want to see specific people, not because you like them or dislike them or whatever, but just because maybe there's a team that you want to be right there at the top of your screen. The first 5 people is everyone from your team. So what's kind of cool is you can decide whether, if you're host, of course, whether you just see that as your view or other people will follow the tile arrangements that you've set up. And I discovered this the other day. I was working with Betsy and Treva, and this is a shot of the video, and I didn't realize they could see this. So I was kind of feeling bad afterwards because they were probably getting dizzy. So in other words, in real time, I can adjust the video tiles, right? I thought this was a total game changer. In fact, a company called Circles came out with a feature that basically allowed you to do this, except with little circles. And I'm wondering if Zoom saw this, they probably did, and said, we need a feature too, where we can do the same thing. And as you saw there, if I click on View and I click the selection Follow Host Video, then everyone in that meeting, so everyone in this meeting, Betsy and Treva, were seeing me moving the video tiles. And I didn't realize that until after the fact. But that's actually pretty cool that you have that option in Zoom now to really customize what you see. And as an instructor, if you're teaching a class and you want your students to see the exact same thing, if 5 people are doing a group presentation, you can use multi-spotlight, so hold the thought on that. But you could do it also this way. So I could drag, if I had 20 people, I could drag the first 5 people at the top, or however many I have showing, to be only those students in my class who are doing that group presentation. So I don't know about you, but for me, this is a game changer. I think it really is something that was needed a long time ago with Zoom. Now, this is also pretty cool, a new feature here with the new versions of Zoom. You can share multiple windows. So in the past, you could share one window at a time. So if I wanted to have Microsoft Word showing, then I'd have to click on that. Then if I wanted to switch to Final Cut Pro, I'd have to then click on Final Cut Pro. So now I can hold the Shift key, and then it allows me to share multiple windows at the same time. And you'll see in a second why this is beneficial, just with, again, a little bit more privacy for you as a host. So again, I hold the Shift to select multiple windows so I can have, now, if I just do desktop share, I'm going to see my desktop. You see that there? That's my screensaver. That's my desktop. It's like a Mojave Desert picture or something. If I do multiple screen share, that will go away. And so it gives me a little more privacy. So now it shows me black there. So if there is space available because of, the apps are not taking, the multiple apps are not taking the full screen, it will replace what used to be my desktop image, whatever that was, a bunch of files, or again, if I had something opened up and I don't want my participants to see that, now it will replace that with black. So it gives you a little more privacy as a host. It's not maybe as monumental as the next two features, which are pin video and multi-spotlight. But again, when you do a screen share now, you'll see more options coming up. The slides as background option for PowerPoint, I think is pretty cool. It's also another one of those top 5 features I would throw up there with rearranging video tiles, and also the next two features, which are pin video and multi-spotlight. So let me get to pin video real quick here. Multiple screen share, just to say about this, you can select that option. If you want participants to share simultaneously, you can have that option set up. And so that might be useful if you have, again, students or community members presenting in a meeting or class, and you want to allow multiple things to show at the same time. You can also select this option here if you have a dual monitor display. So you can actually customize things and have your main video tiles on one screen, and the other screen would be the screen sharing. So that could be really useful to eliminate some of that screen clutter, which can really, I find it all the time in a meeting. It's just really, really challenging to keep everything straight. So let me jump to multi-pin. So I'll mention this later, but pinning and multi-pinning is going to be very useful for I would say particularly for having an interpreter and a student with a hearing disability or hearing impairment in a meeting. So you could click on this tile here and allow people to multi-pin. The multi-pin and the next one, which is the multi-spotlight, you can do up to 9 of these. So you can have 9 of these that are basically highlighted, or the only things that the viewers, whoever those viewers are, will see on the screen. So again, in the case of multi-pinning, it can be really useful if you have an interpreter and a student with hearing impairment who need to see one another, and they don't want to see all the other video tiles on the screen. Now, Spotlight and Multi-Spotlight, I think, would be very useful for a class in which you're doing a group presentation, or you want to break people into a group and you say, okay, now we're going to hear from group 1. So again, if you choose the option up here, that will allow people to do this in the first place, and you'll see what this looks like in a second here. And so for the Spotlight, again, it's just going to show those particular people that you've chosen to spotlight, or in the case of pin, those are the only things that'll show on the screen. So what I would say the difference between the two, because they're really similar in function, both can do up to 9 video windows. Multi-pin would be for students with disabilities and interpreters working together live. That's all they see, and they can understand everything with the conversation through the interpretation happening. Spotlight would be for class presentations or group presentations where you want everyone to see those people who are presenting. You want to see their reactions in real time and not all the other video tiles. So I think that could be useful. I was recently on a virtual accreditation visit, and this was before these features were launched, but we kind of needed that because we had literally 100 people for our open accreditation meetings for the college. And it got confusing because people were trying to introduce each other on the team, you know, maybe 9 people. If we had this feature, we could have had all of those people spotlighted, or we could have used the video tile rearrangement feature that's new. And that way we could have distinguished the 9 people on the visiting accreditation team from the 95 or 100 people who are from the campus there for the open session. So I think it could be really useful for those of you on the call today doing community meetings. I think you might use this a lot just because it has that option to really distinguish people on your Zoom session from one another. Now the next option here is called slides as background, and this I think is pretty slick. So check this out. Let me get ahead of this. See my title slide. What this is going to do is allow you to pull up any PowerPoint that you have on your computer and use that as your backdrop. In other words, it's almost like you go to virtual background, but instead of having the picture of the Golden Gate Bridge showing, you can choose this option. So to find that, go to Screen Share. It's on the second page under Advanced, and it's in beta version now, but it's working fine in my testing of it. And click then on Slides as Background. I could have done these a little more quickly. Sorry about this. I'm waiting for my mouse click here. Come on, Scott. Okay, and then click Share. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I need to locate a PowerPoint, just a test PowerPoint here. I think I was trying to find a PowerPoint at the time. Sorry, let me get ahead to it. So I found my PowerPoint, and once I found it, it takes a second or so to load. And some of these are big, like actually 400 megabytes. My pictures are way too big, but so it may take you a little bit of time to load this up. So once it's loaded up, it'll first prepare the slides for you. So it's presumably like translating these for a format that can be shared. You have to, at least on a Mac, allow that access. So there is a security or privacy access. So the minute you do it then, you'll see what this looks like, is I will appear on top of my PowerPoint slides. So it's kind of cool. And what's neat about this is you will actually be able to resize or not. No, I think you can, you can resize and also move your profile. So you can make yourself bigger or smaller. I know I do this in a second. So as you advance the slides, you'll get a little slide selector in PowerPoint, like you would in PowerPoint, but it'll appear at the bottom of the screen, and you can go backwards and forwards. Now, what you probably want to think about is just make sure that your head or your body, whatever is showing, is not blocking your text. So I could probably think about this ahead of time. If most of my text is always on the right-hand side of my PowerPoints, maybe, then I might move myself to the left-hand side to make it a little easier for the viewer. And let me just jump ahead to show you what it looks like if I resize myself or move myself around. I think I showed that, but yeah, so there we go. So in real time, you can resize yourself, and then you can move yourself anywhere you want on the screen. So I don't know, would any of you use that? Maybe, I don't know. And as you can see there, you can choose some options: split video from slides, resize my video. I have noticed this, when you do a recording using slides as background, it will only show yourself at the top right corner. So if you move yourself to the left on your screen using slides as background, in the recording, it will always, as you see there, top right corner is where it appears in the recording. I don't know why that's the case. Maybe they'll change that in the future, but again, that's how it works. So that might be cool if you're a big PowerPoint user and you want to project yourself in front of your slides and have your Orwellian dream fulfilled. I don't know if that fulfills an Orwellian dream of megomaniacal control, but anyway. So new audio options. Let me make sure this is going to work. These I think are pretty cool. Again, if you're teaching a speech class, if you're teaching music or anything that requires higher quality audio. Now, the first of these might be useful for any of you. This is background noise reduction, and I think I demoed this, so let's see if it works.
This reduction, this could be useful if you're thinking about kids or pets or construction noises outside. And so to simulate this, I will use this very crackly Yule log. We'll just experiment and see if it's gonna, what it may be best here, and see if that will work. And let's go in and adjust settings. Okay, so now as I'm talking, you can see the effect. Another check here to see the effect of it. And we can do high. So if you want, you could just think about using this custom tailored for your situation in terms of the amount of noise that you might.
So again, whether that's useful for you, think about that. I know that we have a lot of distractions that happen during meetings. I don't know. It may end up reducing the quality of your audio. So maybe just try to reduce the noises in your ambient environment instead of using that. So again, if you want the professional audio settings, go to your app version, desktop version, high fidelity music mode, echo cancellation, and stereo audio. If you hover over
This
these,
first test is recording our microphone here without original sound on. So this is the compressed audio that you're hearing from Zoom. That's typical unless you go into your audio settings and make the adjustment as I've talked about today. So now let's turn on original sound, and I think you'll hear the difference in terms of the sound quality, in terms of the fidelity. So now we're hearing the original sound using my Blue Yeti microphone, and I think what you're hearing here is just much more impressive audio. You're not really draining your computer too much by using the original sound. So for those of you teaching in an area where maybe you want to have more clarity with your voice, particularly if you're doing anything with music or singing with vocals, then definitely want to use original audio in terms of your sound on Zoom.
so there's a little more presence. I think you see if you look at, the frequency spectrum, I think it's, higher quality audio. You're seeing just more of the higher frequencies and mid frequencies coming out. You're really going to see this with a music demo in a second. So I definitely recommend that. Let's just pull that up. It should be right here. And again, if you're curious about this and you wonder about frequency responses, 40 kilohertz, a kick drum, 14K or something like that is a symbol for those of you music or audio geeks out there like me that want to know about that. But let me show you this difference here. So this is original audio, not high quality. And let's just say thumb piano. So that's a high quality. So you see it went from this garbled kind of mid sound. We're getting all those high frequencies that you get from a thumb piano. So that one I would say kind of a difference. So again, if you're thinking about that, if you're doing singing, anything that involves performance, really probably want to think about using higher quality audio. The last slide here is just on video on off, and there will be a workshop in the future where we talk a little bit about the challenges about students turning their video off. If you're teaching a class and you want to have live participation, again, there was a chancellor's office legal opinion that said we cannot legally require students to have their video on. So what some schools did, and College of the Canyons looks like they developed a really extensive policy, is they tried to really have more flexibility as an option for students. So they said, if you can attend 7 out of 10 of my live Zoom sessions, that would be great. If you do attend, please keep your camera on 75% of the time. Try to be very present if possible. If you have to go to the bathroom, if you have to have an emergency or something like that, get a drink of water, you can mute your audio and video, but please come back and try to participate. So this is the one that I think we'll come back to later and maybe just talk about how can we improve the participation of students in classes when we can't really legally require them to have their video on. And I'll stop my share there. So, man, I know I talked a lot, but again, I try to get through a lot of this. And the other reason is because I'm trying to get a clean video to share with folks later. But go ahead, Stefan. Did you have a hand up?
Maybe a pop quiz or something like that?
You can do a pop quiz. Now, again, if I'm reading the Chancellor's Office directive correctly, if you had a pop quiz and, I don't know, that's a tricky one because I'm thinking about the student leaves, but in a sense, that's no different than a student leaving a face-to-face class when we used to have those at the college, where you give the pop quiz. And I used to do this early on when I first started teaching at the college, and students didn't like it. But I said, hey, if you leave class early, I might give you a pop quiz right after the break. And so that's one maybe for you to manage. And if you had some options to do a makeup or something, I don't know. That it's very tricky. It's hard for me to answer that, I guess.
In the syllabus, I may give pop quizzes. Here's the deal. If you guys discuss in class, if you take up all the class time working on assignments, talking to me, having good class discussions, then there will be no pop quizzes because I won't have time for them. But
Yeah.
on the other hand, if I can't, part of what I'm trying to teach them is interact with you, the professor.
Yeah.
So if you don't interact with me, then I will give a pop quiz at any time that I like. And it can either be a class discussion where we all get together and talk about each question, and then everybody gets points that's been in the class, everybody gets points who was there. Or I will just put it up there and say, here's 10 minutes, I'll be back.
Mhm.
And it's right there in the syllabus. So I think they're forewarned. If you think I can't do that, let me know. But forewarned, as far as I'm concerned, they're, as far as I know, I can do it. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't have the answer. It's just, when you read that legal opinion, it's a little gray because I think they realize there's a lot of difference out there in terms of how we run a class. I know one of the things that Dr. Dirk does in political science is he has a number they have to hit, a threshold. I did this with the Promise class when I taught it, but it was, of course, in person. You have to attend 7 out of 10 Zoom sessions. So maybe you could set up something with your quiz where you say, I will drop the lowest score, or I'll do one makeup quiz, but you have to get 4 out of 5 to possibly get maximum credit. There isn't really a clear answer on this. It's kind of like our deal with plagiarism years ago. Most people forgot about this, but the Chancellor's Office back in the 2000s wrote a legal opinion saying you cannot fail a student for plagiarizing in a class. And, we've had some discussions about this statewide and locally, but we kind of just forgot about that a little bit because for whatever reason, maybe people have plagiarize less, or maybe instructors do what they do and there's never a challenge and nothing ever gets to a level of a legal challenge. But there's a lot of gray areas with this. Even people talking about privacy concerns, even the non-extreme people that are really concerned about Big Brother and the QAnon people, even the non-extreme folks have said, what happens with information shared on Zoom when a recording is stored is the privacy of students being violated, hence the reason for that end-to-end encryption option. But there's a lot of gray areas. Any other instructors on the call? Do you want to offer what you do as far as those requirements that are live Zoom requirements, a quiz or a video on moment? Do you have any suggestions for Stephanie? Because again, it's very gray in my mind. I guess I would say to build, as you said, the forewarning, tell them ahead of time what you're doing, and then maybe incorporate some level of flexibility there, but not an unreasonable level of flexibility. I think there's always a question. I'm dealing with this as we speak. I've got a pile of ISP grading that I have to get to, and I'm looking at one student who turned in his work very late, whereas everyone else at that same prison turned the work in at the appropriate time. So typically what I will do is reach out and ask either the students or reach out to the ISP office and say, hey, is there any legitimate reason that this student didn't turn their work in? So that might be one way of getting around it too, is just putting the policy in there. And then later on, if someone says, hey, the reason I missed your pop quiz was I came down with COVID, and I can prove that to you with a note, that maybe gives you some sense of peace that, okay, they're not trying to, just whatever, get out of my quiz when they had no legit reason to get out of it. So
I've got plenty of other opportunities for them to earn points
Yeah.
to get to the grade that they desire. They just have to speak in my class.
Sure.
And that's so they can make it up in other ways. How's that? So
that's great. And in a speech class, here's the deal. If you're a student in a speech class and you say, I never want to turn my video on or my audio on, that wouldn't be fair. How could that student pass legitimately pass a speech class without having audio or video on. And I know I see Trevor there. That was one of the issues early on, I think, concerned with the CSUs about that speech requirement going online. They said, hey, this has got to be real. It can't be just, some joke. I mean, a speech class requires you to have physical and auditory presence, video presence, physical presence, whatever, in real time. It can't just be some kind of, I don't know.
Oh, I taught that. I taught that first class. And
Yeah, I
yeah, the
remember
chancellor's office said, great. And yeah, at the end of the quarter, it was, you're done. So
Yeah.
life. But
Yeah,
yeah, you
Trevor.
got it, especially in speech, you got to be there.
Well, and I think, Stephanie, you probably have kind of, I don't know, assurance that because it's related to the student learning outcomes of your course. I mean, that's
Yes.
really kind of where the weight is for you, is that it is, it's part tied into the student learning outcome of your course. Whereas maybe my business class or something like that, unless that's an element of the course that, like I said, that is, it ties into the transferability, all those types of things. I'd probably have to be less inclined and do, try to make better backups and do different things. But if it's an Eve course, I mean, it was supposed to be taught face to face. They were supposed to be there on Tuesday, Thursday from a certain time, that kind of a thing. Then I think you probably have, you've got something kind of in with the class requirements that maybe other disciplines don't.
I agree. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Thank you.
Of course. We can take a few more questions. I realize I didn't put in the chat the second workshop today, so I put it up there now from 2 to 3, the starting from scratch. So that's there. Any other Zoom questions or things I didn't cover, features I didn't cover? Do you think you'll use some of those new features, the slides as background? Will you use the, I know everyone's going to use the studio effects, right? All of you are going to wear your little chef's hat, and I'm sure. But will you use any of these features?
It's interesting, Scott. Tracy actually shared with me a class that she took, and it was about how to engage students with the Zoom and that kind of thing. And those different effects, you can have the students. What was interesting, if a student didn't want to share their video, the instructor said, okay, we're going to be talking about a certain topic, and the students had to go find an image or of themselves or another image that depicted what they were going to be talking about, and they had to post it. That's what they had to put in. So there's different ways we can engage the student so that we know that they're participating. Or then you say that also. You say, okay, you're the next 2 minutes, go find that image that now shows that kind of a thing, where you can get some more active participation in your. I haven't been teaching Eve yet. I'll be doing it in the spring if we're still at home. But just some different ways that people are doing things, I think, can really be creative ideas.
Oh, I'm emphasizing Zoom as more as video conferencing. I'm taking public speaking and doing more video conferencing with it, because there's no way we can get people up on a stage and have them move around and really use the entire space like they would be required to do in a public speaking class. So we just adjust.
Yeah, I was going to say that my wife was telling me there was an NPR story recently about this, and it was a K-12 focus, but I guess a lot of students, they were saying K-12 didn't want to show their videos because they were embarrassed. It kind of relates to equity issues and socioeconomic issues, embarrassed about, maybe all the people sharing their room or what it looks like or something like this. So again, if we can put in more flexibility and say hey, you could use your virtual background and it'll blur everything out. You'll just see your face. If, you'll have some privacy there for that reason. Again, the distractions from audio and stuff, you could experiment with some of the new background audio suppression features. But, there are some issues out there that relate less to technology, more it's about shame or people not having, or not having good Wi-Fi, which is something we've tried to work on as a college with getting those Wi-Fi hubs out there. And I'm just reading some of the chat there. Yeah. And the thing Amber's talking about, all the features, the thing about Zoom I'm finding is that they are changing features and updating features so much more quickly than they ever did. So definitely check every week. It seems like there's a new update. It could be minor, but some of the features are really major. So you just want to make sure you have all those updates when they come out. So cool. So if there are any other questions, we'll call it done. And I might see some of you later today, or again later this week. We'll have some more sessions. So thank you all for the messages in Zoom, and good luck with using Zoom this quarter. And I'll see some of you back probably real soon. So thank you all today for participating. Bye, everyone.